This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Kal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is the one and only legendary, in my honest opinion, Rob McConnell. Welcome back. So, what are we going to talk about tonight? We're going to talk about a whole spectrum of issues, because here on Kal's Corner, on the X-Zone Radio Broadcast Network, we talk about everything from politics to the paranormal, and that is a wide spectrum of subjects. So let's continue to talk about what's going on now and give you some updates, and then we'll break some new ground. We spoke in last week's episode about the terrible, terrible shooting in Las Vegas. Well, we know a lot more about what happened now since we did the show, so let's get updated on that. We know that the killer, the shooter, took his own life, basically just as police were about ready to barge into his room where he was massacring people from with his high-powered rifles. And the reason that police were able to find the room, it turns out, is because he had fired so many bullets from the window of his hotel room that the smoke from the ammunition actually set off the fire alarms and the smoke detectors, if you will, inside his own room. That helped police narrow down where the shooting was coming from. As the SWAT team was in there to get ready to take him out, he took his own life. Now, when he killed himself, they found, of course, many high-powered weapons and tons of ammunition. They then raided his house, found even more guns and thousands of more bullets. And as we mentioned in last week's episode, immediately the opportunists in Washington, D.C., that we euphemistically call politicians, seized on this incident to push their private agendas, which is either to impose stricter gun control laws on people or to actually lobby in the other direction. So let's give an update about that. As we mentioned last week, it is predictable that politicians will always play politics with this issue, and shame on them for doing that, because it's terrible when something like this happens, and when tragedies happen, one should never play politics with them. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what the tragedy is. Let's say it's a hurricane, for example. You have global warming nuts who will rush to say, that's evidence of global warming. They're doing that again with the current hurricane that has hit Louisiana. But it turns out that this one has petered out to just a severe storm. So it doesn't go in the win column for global warming at all. In fact, it is evidence against it, certainly not evidence for it. So getting back to the shooting, as predicted, the idea that they're going to be able to pass strict gun control laws now has petered out. It's not going to happen. And this is ironic because the NRA, the myth about the NRA, and I'm not a member of the NRA, I don't really know what their policies are other than they defend the rights of gun owners. In my opinion, too much sometimes. I think there are some issues that should be legislated that the NRA disagrees with. They support a few changes to gun laws to tighten them and also eliminate the legal right for certain things to exist on the market, such as extending stocks and tools that can convert a rifle from a semi-automatic to an automatic killing machine. And yet, where are the laws being passed by our so-called representative government where the NRA is saying, yeah, we support it, let's do it, let's do something? Nothing is getting done. So there's no excuse. The excuse is always, we can't do it because we can't fight the big money in politics from the NRA. But yet here the NRA is with a short list, it is short, I admit that, of things that they don't mind if they get changed in the laws. you would think that the legislators being handed this freebie would be able to do something with it. And competent people would. When you get a free gift, you do something with it. You don't ignore it. You don't refuse it, especially when you claim you want it. But yet that is the dysfunction that passes for government in Washington, D.C., is even though they agree with what the NRA is doing in some instances, nothing gets done. Now, if you can explain that logically, more power to you. But the fact is, there is no logic to it because it just doesn't make any sense. But so much of what goes on in Washington, D.C. nowadays does not make any sense. And if I had to cite one example of how terrible the U.S. government is being run by its politicians into the ground, it is imploding, I would have to say, look at the deficit, $20 trillion in debt. And at some point, someone's going to care, and then the country will be even in more trouble. And what's ironic about the debt is that it was $10 trillion in debt when Barack Obama took over. He declared, and he was right, that George Bush was irresponsible for raking up $10 billion in debt. But what does Obama do after 8 years in office? He doubles the debt to another $10 trillion. It's a total of $20 trillion. So if Bush was irresponsible for $10 trillion, what is Barack Obama? I guess doubly irresponsible since the debt doubled. So we'll be back in a moment after this commercial break. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. Welcome to this edition of Cal's Corner. We'll come back updating about the Vegas shooter.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Is it science or is it magic? Once a magical thing has been scientifically proven, is it no longer magic? Or is magic simply the science of tomorrow? Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, on The Science of Magic, a syndicated radio program dedicated to combining the science and magic of today's dynamic and controversial topics to co-create new solutions. By triangulating information from today's leading experts from the scientific and magical fields, we uncover expansive and evolutionary truths you won't find anywhere else. Join us daily on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, as I interview the share thoughts with the amazing guests from both science and magic. The resulting knowledge is unprecedented. As a gift to you, the listener, past episodes can be accessed on our website free of charge at thescienceofmagic.net.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
Welcome back to the second segment of Kal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Again, my name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and our executive producer is, once again, Rob McConnell. Now, to wrap the issue up about the Las Vegas shooter, you have the hypocrisy that continues unabated, unanswered, of course, and out of control in Washington, D.C. It's not a coincidence that most Americans do not like their representatives. In fact, the approval rating of Congress is as low as 8 to 13%, depending on the poll. The politicians are lucky that the approval rating is that high. And in fact, in my opinion, that is hard scientific evidence that 8 to 13% of Americans are just crazy and nuts. So, aside from the politicians and the fact that gun control isn't going to happen this round, probably never actually, but they rushed to use this as an excuse, it turns out that the Democrats, who I often call Dumbocrats because of how they act, let's be honest, it takes a lot of special talent to have, at one time 8 years ago, a supermajority where they control Congress, the Senate, the White House. Now they're 0 for 4 in the elections. Look at what happened with Hillary Clinton. She is, and this is independent of whether you support her or not, and I do not. I never have. I've always been politically neutral. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. She is the biggest loser in the history of American politics in the modern era. Nobody has won so many votes and still couldn't win an election and become president. She broke that glass ceiling. So, about the Vegas shooter, even Dianne Feinstein, who's known as a left-wing liberal, has said, and you can look it up, that no laws could have prevented this shooting. And I often don't agree with Feinstein, but in this case, she is right. There isn't a single law that would have prevented this shooting from happening. Because at the end of the day, as the British love to say, if someone wants to harm you, if someone wants to commit an act of violence, it's very hard to stop that person. And as we mentioned in last week's show, I talked about the issue of Great Britain and how their strict gun controls haven't really protected them at all. In fact, terrorists and people who want to commit violent crimes, they tend to use knives, or they tend to take a car and mow people down. And a few days later, that happened in Great Britain. Yet another incident where someone took a car and used it as a weapon to mow people down. Again, this happened shortly after the Vegas shooting, and it's going to continue to happen in Great Britain because, as the British say, at the end of the day, if someone really wants to hurt you, the odds are they're going to find ways to get away with it and do it. It doesn't matter what laws are on the books, because people who want to do such things don't care about the laws, don't follow the laws, therefore laws, as it applies to them, are useless. Now, what do we know about the Vegas shooter? the police are still very stumped. As of this broadcast here, they say they still don't have a motive. Apparently, he did act alone. He did not have an accomplice. And if there's evidence that he was connected to the Islamo-fascist terrorist group, the Islamic State, that evidence has yet to be made public. In fact, it seems, based on what has been released to the general public to date, that there is no connection between him and the Islamic State. And as has happened in the past, on occasion, it seems that the Islamic State is trying to claim morbid credit for something they had no involvement in. On the other hand, police are pursuing a couple of leads. Apparently, the shooter went to the Middle East, and it is possible, keyword possible here, but not proven, that maybe during the time that he was suffering his gradual and systematic breakdown mentally, that he may have become radicalized. They don't know yet. One of the issues that they are trying to run down is exactly how he had so much money. He lost tens of thousands of dollars due to an online gambling addiction. And of course, just before the killings, he placed several bets for tens of thousands of dollars. No information, at least on my end, as to how he did when he placed those bets. But we must remember that in Vegas, the house tends to always win. That's the way it is. Now, I mentioned the term Islamo-fascist when I describe the Islamic State. I get criticized by liberals for that, and I'll call them that because they tend to be liberals who attack me over making that claim. They say that it's divisive and that it doesn't help people understand terrorism. That's nonsense. In fact, it's very clear as to why I use it, and I'm going to prove it in a moment. If anything, the attack against me, and it's not just me, it's others who use this term when we say Islamo-fascist, it's not divisive. People who try to prevent understanding why I use that term and why it is scientifically accurate is divisive. Now, here's the difference here. In the politically correct left-wing liberal media, and unfortunately that's most of what I call the lamestream media in the U.S. especially, where they tend to be afraid of their own shadows, they use the term Islamist to describe a terrorist group like Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State. And that is just ridiculous. It's like calling an elephant a car or a giraffe a banana. It's not going to work. It has nothing to do with it. It is delusional, liberal nonsense. Let me prove it. There are two major types of terrorist groups. Islamo-fascists, like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, they seek global domination, okay? They want to conquer the world. Al-Qaeda wants to conquer the world. They make no secret about it. They're proud of what they want to do. And the Islamic State, you must remember, published a few years ago their so-called 5-year plan to conquer everything from Portugal all the way down to the southern tip of India. Every single geographic location where Muslim conquerors in the past had so much as put a toe in the sand or dirt, depending on where they were, and said, "This land is mine." So they want to reclaim everything that used to belong to the so-called glory days of Islam, where they conquered much of the world, much like the Roman Empire had done for key parts of the world. So a group that is Islamo-fascist seeks global domination, united and led by a single dictatorial, all-powerful ruler called a caliph. And the whole empire is called a caliphate. And Islam used to have that when it was at its peak before the schism between Sunni and Shia Muslims started, which has never ended. They've been killing each other for over 1,400 years, each claiming to be the right path to Islam. And this is exactly what you have with the Islamic State. They have an all-powerful leader, al-Baghdadi. He resurfaced again recently in a radio broadcast that was released, a tape recording of it. It wasn't live. And Western analysts had cautiously estimated that perhaps he had died in a series of bombing raids that the Russian Air Force, thankfully, had unleashed, and they had killed thousands of Islamic State terrorists, but it turns out that he apparently is alive, or at least as of when this broadcast was made. We don't know the date. And he is their all-powerful leader, their caliph, okay? The Islamic equivalent of a Hitler or a Stalin or a Chairman Mao. That makes them fascist, okay? And they use Islam as their so-called political and philosophical and religious doctrine instead of the little green book or the little red book or Mein Kampf like the Nazis used to use when Hitler ran Germany into the ground. So Al-Qaeda had Osama bin Laden. He was their all-powerful leader. So it is actually, unquestionably, factually correct to call such groups Islamo-fascist because they are fascist, they are united under one all-powerful leader, and they are Islamic. Duh, hello. Fascism, Islam, Islamo-fascist. It couldn't be more logical unless you're a left-wing la-la liberal. Now, for those who still disagree with this, let me educate you on the difference between an Islamo-fascist group like, again, Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State versus the other kind of terrorist group, the other major kind, let's call it group number B, the Taliban, Hamas, Hezbollah. They are Islamist groups, and the difference is this. The Afghan Taliban, who were briefly in power until they were ousted by the United States in the aftermath of the attacks of September 11th of 2001. They are not Islamo-fascist. They may have an all-powerful ruler, but they care about local power, what's called regional power. They're not interested in what happens in Florida. They don't care what goes on in San Francisco, but they do care what goes on in their neighborhood, in this case, Afghanistan. So yes, they want to conquer and rule over Afghanistan, which is what they used to do. So Islamic groups that are united behind a leader or a group of leaders, doesn't matter, who seek only regional power, only regional control, those are Islamist groups. They are not Islamo-fascist because they don't seek global domination. Now, thankfully, for lack of a better term, most of the terrorist groups out there are regionalists. They're Islamist groups. We're talking about the Islamic terrorist groups. There are other terrorist groups out there as well, such as FARC. This is a communist-driven left-wing group that has terrorized South America for decades. Over 25,000 people have been killed in that conflict. And of course, it goes largely unignored or ignored in the West because the West is too busy covering other stories, such as what, some celebrity might be thinking or worrying over. So that is the difference between the two groups. I will not back down in my use of those terms because I am the one, I didn't make them up, but I am using them correctly. And I know about this because I was educated on all this stuff when I lived in Europe for many years. And of course, I've covered the issue of terrorism extensively. So back to the shooter in Vegas. We have no idea if he was connected to the Islamo-fascist group, the Islamic State. That has yet to be determined. They're claiming credit for it, but the evidence has yet to be made public that that is really true. When it comes in, we'll talk about that. Now, as we wind down our section, or on this segment regarding the Vegas shooting, once again, so far we're lucky that another mass shooting has not broken out. Usually one or two copycat cases occur within a week or so of a major event like that. Thankfully, that has not happened, and that the pattern has been broken this time around. And if anything, we've gotten lucky. On the other hand, things in Chicago continue the way they are. It's out of control there. It remains the murder capital of the world, despite some of the strictest gun laws on the books, because most of the people being shot in Chicago are blacks killing blacks. They don't care about the laws. They don't buy their weapons legally. Therefore, gun control does not matter. And the Democrats, who control everything in Chicago and are responsible for its near bankrupt financial state, they, of course, continue to do nothing of substance to curb the gun violence or black-on-black violence. Instead, they like to stand up there for their photo op whenever a mass shooting occurs by a white person, especially if the victims are black, and they ignore the black-on-black crime wave, which has, of course, plagued the nation for many, many years. And the way to describe this whole thing is hypocrisy, to be polite. There's much stronger terms we can use, but this is a family-friendly show, so we won't go there. All right. When we come back, we're going to give you an update on Hillary Clinton and talk about her briefly. Then we'll talk about Communist China and how they are actively planning right now as we speak to invade the country of Taiwan by the year 2020. In fact, they call it the 2020 plan, just like NBA types would. We'll be back in a moment. My name is Kal Korff.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com.
Hello, I'm Justina Marsh, and with my dad Pete, we are going to present a new show called Too Good to Be True. Together, we are aiming to discover more truths about this world and beyond. Do you have unanswered questions about the world? Do you ever wonder about aliens, conspiracy theories, or the universe? There are many shows discussing subjects such as pyramids or UFOs, but we want to relay this information based on our own research, including from spiritual means. Hopefully, listeners will be helped with their own beliefs and will appreciate the psychic insights that add to the previous research and information. We both look forward to sharing this insight and beginning this journey with our listeners. Visit xzbn.net for more information about when to listen.
Ancient prophecies, legends, and current events indicate we're entering a high-frequency era supporting enlightenment. During expansive times, old rules fail, necessitating access to the ever-shifting currents of life for guidance. There's an ancient form of shamanism through which we can obtain the information we need. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Art School, with a great new provision for those interested in spiritual evolution and personal empowerment. Galactic Shamanism, Art of the Ancients, Key to Tomorrow, is an upcoming series of leading-edge online affordable classes designed to guide and support you and your family during these times of transition. Embrace the magic. Empower your life. Study Galactic Shamanism at findyourpathhome.com.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back to the third segment of Cal's Corner here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And once again, our executive producer is Rob McConnell. Now, we were talking about, again, the Vegas shooter and the hypocrisy and the games going on regarding that, and how the effort to use this as an excuse to move gun control forward has failed, and how even la liberal hero, left-winger Dianne Feinstein has said that no laws could have prevented this. So the Democrats are at least smart enough this time around to back off and say we're not going to go there. And they're so competent that they're not going to work with the NRA to move forward on issues they agree on, because God forbid they should do the right thing. Instead, it's better to point fingers and blame the other side while doing nothing, and the Democrats are masters at that. Same with the Republicans, by the way. Now, let's switch to a subject that is on some people's minds, Hillary Clinton. She's in the news again as of a few hours ago because finally, after many people came forward and immediately stood up to be counted and spoke out against it, she has now come out and she has condemned and shocked, according to her, over the revelations about former Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein. Well, he actually might still be a current Hollywood mogul. Right now he's persona non grata because of alleged problems regarding his mistreatment of women. Now, what's interesting about this story is that the New York Times had the facts in 2004. Now, what year is it? It's 2017. The New York Times, shame on them, and they've done this before, they'll do it again. They have sat on this story for 13 years. They could have run with it years ago, but they couldn't be bothered to do it. Maybe somebody figured out it was a slow news day and ran forward with it. And now, of course, Weinstein has been fired by his own company. Now, I'm going to tell you something that is true. When I worked down in Hollywood in the late 1990s doing some programs for Fox and some appearances on NBC, on the Lisa Show, and so on, Weinstein, of course, was a very famous name. I knew who he was, he and his brother. Even I heard scuttlebutt about him, which I won't repeat, but he was held up as an example when it was shared to me of what's wrong with Hollywood. And it didn't surprise me because the so-called casting couch is infamous, and in fact, it's rampant in India. It's an open secret in India and what is called Bollywood here, which is a terrible, terrible knockoff and ridiculous bad attempt to copy Hollywood. The casting couch is very common, especially in India, and nobody cares to change it. That's just the way the society is here. I'm not saying it's right. It's very wrong, but it is rampant, and as long as some men want to remain pigs, it's not going to change. So now Hillary, and you must remember that when she ran for president, she went way over the top over comments that Donald Trump had made about grabbing women in the private parts 13 years earlier. She was still complaining about that on a recording he had made by Bush, the reporter. Well, it turns out that Hillary has condemned what Harvey has said, what Harvey Weinstein allegedly did. But unlike other people who took large amounts of money from him, Hillary's not going to give back a single dime. At least other politicians had the ethics to take that money and at least donate it to charity. Hillary seems determined to keep it for her favorite charity, which of course has always been the Clintons. So hopefully she'll change her mind. She should be pressured to do so, and she'll put that money elsewhere and give it to a more worthy cause than Hillary Clinton. By the way, I want to mention here real quickly that I do have a book out called What Didn't Happen, Exposing Hillary's False Claims. It's volume 1 because I expect to do 3 books total. And all it does is it just exposes claims that she has made which are not true, some of which are blatant lies. And let me just give you 2 quick examples. Remember when she said that she had a vivid recollection? She said this at least 3 times on 3 different occasions, and she kept elaborating on her nonsense and her lie, it was a lie, let's be blunt, about dodging sniper fire in Bosnia, yet footage taken at the time of Hillary at the event shows that there were no snipers firing anything, that she took her time on the tarmac, actually posed for photographs and had talked to children and signed some autographs. She made it up. And then when she was busted by CBS News and other news organizations who were there at the time filming that event, she said obviously she misremembered something. No, she didn't misremember anything. She said on 3 separate occasions that she had a vivid recollection of this event, and it's kind of hard to mistake sniper fire, which never happened in your life, versus not being under sniper fire. Ask yourself this question. Have you ever in your life, as incredible as it may be, whatever you've done in your life, have you ever told people that you dodged sniper fire when you've never even had any such thing even come close to happening? No. People don't misremember things that way unless they either have a mental problem, schizophrenia might explain it, or they're lying. And in the case of Hillary Clinton, she's lying since there is no evidence that, at least I know of, that she is schizophrenic. Another example is her statement, and it is a lie. It's not a misunderstanding of the issues. It's not a misremember or misstatement. And this is what I expose her for in Volume 1 of my new book. It's this myth that there was voter suppression that kept poor Hillary from winning the state of Wisconsin, giving it to Donald Trump. That is not what happened. Hillary Clinton, in her book called What Happened, notice it's no question mark, she tells you what happened because she's certain of the facts, even though she makes them up. She claims when she writes about what happened in Wisconsin that voter suppression caused her to lose the election in Wisconsin, give the state to Donald Trump, and there is no credible evidence that voter suppression played a role at all. In fact, the voter turnout was actually higher in this last election than it was in the previous contest between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. In fact, it was lower in the state of New York, who has no voter ID laws, than it was in Wisconsin. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you that voter ID laws were not a factor. Now, why did Hillary lose the state of Wisconsin? The answer couldn't be more obvious, folks. Don't fall for what she says because it is a lie. She lost because Wisconsinites, people who live in Wisconsin, they've never liked Hillary Clinton. She is 0 for 3 in that state, and it's easily proven. Barack Obama trounced her when they ran against each other in the 2008 presidential election, which Hillary infamously lost and imploded. She couldn't even win the first contest in Iowa. She came in third. She lost again to Bernie Sanders. And yet, at that point, the race was effectively over mathematically. Sanders really had no realistic chance of winning the nomination, yet he still won Wisconsin. And he beat her by double digits. Obama beat her by double digits. And Hillary Clinton herself was so arrogant, she admits that she took the state for granted. She never campaigned there a single day. Now, think about that for a moment. It takes a lot of special talents to not bother campaigning in a state you have never won. Does that make any sense to you? I question her judgment and her decision-making capabilities, and if she can't handle a simple issue like that you make a point to campaign in a state you especially have never won, hello, I don't think you're qualified to be president, because God forbid what your thinking process would be if you had to deal with something really important, like trying to contain communist China, rather than trying to win a simple election. Now, Hillary says that there was a study done by Civis Analytics. She actually says it was actually done by a organization, and they paid Civis Analytics to do this study. What she doesn't tell you in her book, because she's Hillary Clinton, is that the organization was her super PAC. In other words, she's citing a study done by her largest super PAC, an entity that gave her over $130 million. It was her cash cow feeding trough, if you will. And they paid a firm called Civis Analytics, which was founded by the Barack Obama campaign or personnel from it, who answered directly to David Axelrod, who of course was Obama's campaign manager and chief strategist, and of course special advisor to Obama, and he ran both campaigns, and he was successful and got Obama reelected twice. And this study is very flawed. What they did is they looked at the issue of voter ID laws and possible voter suppression in other states, and then they took that data from the state of Minnesota. They assumed it was the same in Wisconsin. Never mind the reality that Wisconsin is Wisconsin and Minnesota is Minnesota. Every state is different. And they said that based on this, it must be voter suppression, that it caused Hillary to lose 200,000 votes. But yet if you ask people on the ground in Wisconsin, why didn't you bother voting? Because voter turnout was down compared to the previous election when Hillary had lost to Bernie Sanders. They will tell you that they weren't excited by this race. Blacks especially were not excited. They didn't have a brother running for office, so to speak. They weren't excited about Hillary Clinton. And commendably, the New York Times, of all newspapers, actually did a decent article where they interviewed people and said, why, what was the issue? Why didn't you vote? And they said, we didn't care because Hillary doesn't really represent us. She just pretends to. And they felt that way about other mainstream long-time career politicians. It wasn't a comment directed only at Hillary. And they didn't care about, they weren't excited over Donald Trump. So even though they knew that not voting for Hillary would help Trump, they just had apathy. And voter apathy has been a problem in the U.S. for many years. In fact, if you look at official statistics, you find that almost half the people, almost half, we can round up the math, of those who could vote just don't bother. And this has been true for a long time. It was even true when Reagan won his famous landslide against Jimmy Carter. Roughly half the people who could vote didn't bother. So whoever does win the election doesn't always mean this is the majority of those voters making that decision for that candidate. It's actually a subset, the majority of those who bother voting, and sometimes that is not the majority of voters. So we have to keep that in mind. So once again, that's the skinny, if you will, on Hillary Clinton. Now the liberal media will be fawning over and waiting to see if Hillary changes her mind and decides to give back the money that Harvey Weinstein has given her over the years, which is a lot of money, estimated to be possibly several $1 million. But right now she's holding firm and is going to keep the money for herself. But of course she condemns what Harvey Weinstein did. That's, again, just a piece of meat being thrown to the media. It's a worthless statement because it is not backed up by anything tangible. I'll believe it is sincere when Hillary puts her checkbook where her mouth is. Now let's switch to some international stuff. This will go into the next segment as well. Let's talk about communist China. In my interactions recently on social media with some Hillary supporters, they keep telling me that Donald Trump is the biggest threat to the United States. I think that's ridiculous because Donald Trump, regardless of whether you like him or not, and I didn't vote for him, I didn't support him, and I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton either. Again, I actually sat out this election because I refused to back a cheater named Hillary Clinton who rigged the primaries with the Democratic Party against Sanders. I actually supported Sanders. And of course, I've never voted or supported Republicans, so I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. In fact, I wrote articles, which my critics ignore, which is really stupid, that Donald Trump wasn't qualified to be president because he had no experience and he doesn't have the temperament. And of course, history has so far vindicated my position, and I don't even claim that my view on him is original. So, what has happened is people who hate Trump, they act just as bad as Trump does sometimes. Trump is backed by some extremists, let's be honest, the so-called white supremacists. Okay, that's not right, but for them to go ahead and act...
The Earth is under ever-increasing pressure from untenable lifestyles and growing populations. Yet, viable answers seem in short supply. What if I told you there's an ancient form that can empower you to take charge of your life? What if your entire family could be enfolded and supported by life itself, finding safe passage through challenging times? I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Art School, with great news. An upcoming series of leading-edge online affordable classes based in an ancient form of shamanism, easily learned and used by your entire family. Galactic Shamanism, Art of the Ancients, Key to Tomorrow are a series of online adult and children's lessons instructing your entire family on natural law, how to cooperate with and be supported by the powers of the universe. Visit findyourpathhome.com to find these unique and powerful classes.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Are you curious? Do you want to learn more about how the world works and have fun at the same time? Study coincidences with me, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, on my Connecting with Coincidence radio show, here on the XZBN network. Listen to Jungians theorize, statisticians randomize, true believers evangelize, while I categorize. I dance to the rhythm of coincidences. People who experience me see more of them. Maybe something on the show matches a thought in your mind. Let us know. Expand your mind to the weirdness happening around you. Synchronicity spoken here, there, and everywhere. For more information, put Connecting with Coincidence in your search engine and find my website, my social media sites, and my blog.
What is truth? Historically, we viewed things as either being true or false. Now, as we enter a more expansive era, we find the question is not, is it true, but rather, how true is it? I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, host of the Science of Magic Radio, a syndicated, internationally broadcast radio program dedicated to uncovering this ever-expanding truth. Join me daily on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, as I interview today's leading experts from the fields of science and magic to uncover the hidden truth between the lines drawn in the sand. What we unearth in our discussions is not only amazing, but totally unprecedented. You won't want to miss a single episode. In service to our listeners, past episodes can always be found on our website with our compliments at thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Kal's Corner. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and this is the X-Zone Broadcast Network. And once again, I keep saying this because I'm happy and honored that Rob McConnell is our executive producer. Boy, this hour goes by fast. I don't really like to hear myself talk. I tend to go into a zone or whatever you want to call it, but boy, time always goes fast when I'm doing this show, and according to Einstein, time always flies by fast when you're having fun, right? So let's now talk about communist China. And what does that have to do with Hillary Clinton? Well, not officially anything, although the Clintons are responsible for making changes in laws which helped communist China become the economic powerhouse that it is, because it was during Clinton's presidency. And I remember this very vividly because I was working at a company called Boeing at the time. I had some friends of mine actually left the company. And I was shocked because Boeing, of course, is a cush job, wonderful company to work for, and they have things called retirement, which is a rarity in this world nowadays, especially in the U.S. And I asked them why they were leaving, and they said, haven't you heard? We're starting all these call centers. Asia's the big growth thing, and because of changes in the laws, we're going to open up a call center and sell our services back to the United States and various companies. And I thought they were nuts at first. I thought, you're just dreaming, it's not going to work. Well, all these years later, call centers are ubiquitous. They're especially run in India and, of course, overseas in Asia. So what happened is this. China has announced, and this is not a new announcement, they've just reaffirmed their commitment to what they call the 2020 plan. China, of course, has always felt that the country of Taiwan is part of China, and they officially declare it to be a rogue province of China, much in the same nonsense way that Saddam Hussein had declared Kuwait to be a province of Iraq. It was never true, but that's what he said. And the Chinese have said for decades that they're going to retake Taiwan and invade it militarily and forcibly cause a reunification. Now, China has been steadily building up its military for decades. It is still in sad shape in many, many areas. They may have a huge standing army, but they're not in a position to fight a sustained conflict. They would have to rely on basically German blitzkrieg type war tactics to survive a war. But what China has recently recommitted itself to is their 2020 plan, which the short version of which calls for them to invade Taiwan in the year 2020 under military force, of course, and take it back. Now, this is one of the reasons that they have been expanding their territorial presence by making artificial islands in the water over there, and of course declaring this to be Chinese sovereign territory. Thankfully, the international community has basically told China, you're smoking some bad stuff, we're not going to honor this, and the U.S. sends its warships right through the area, and they should do that to tell China, hey, you can't stop us. But the United States, of course, has a problem in that China is doing what it can to undermine the U.S. constantly by now militarizing some of these bases. The United States has told China that if they do that, the U.S. will retaliate by militarizing assets in the region. There is Japan, which is caught in the middle of all of this, and Japan is now considering making nuclear weapons, and of course they're vastly expanding their military as well. Now, the reason I mention this is because it is shameful that the United Nations, and we must remember that Communist China is a member of the UN so-called Security Council, which makes the issue a bit hypocritic on this subject, meaning there's hypocrisy here. To stop China, you'd have to take the issue to the UN and the Security Council. And because China is a member of that Security Council and it can't recuse itself, and it wouldn't recuse itself, it would simply veto anything. Just like if Russia doesn't want to agree with the U.S. at the Security Council, it vetoes whatever. Even France threatened to veto us many times. You must remember that the main reason Republican George Bush stopped going to the UN is because Jacques Chirac, who was president of France at the time, said, we will veto you if you decide to go to war against Iraq. So Bush told the Security Council where they could essentially shove it, acted unilaterally or actually in partnership with dozens of coalition nations, as they call themselves, and he did invade Iraq, and the rest is history. So the UN Security Council is dysfunctional in that it operates and was created under a paradigm of the Cold War that no longer applies to the modern world. I support the expansion of the Security Council to include nations like India. The only thing preventing India from joining the Security Council is, of course, Communist China, because they are the only holdout and they have veto power. So what is China doing to thwart the U.S.? Not only all these games economically, where it cheats and goes ahead and devalues and undervalues its currency and manipulates it. They are a currency manipulator. But they also have covertly been funding the nuclear weapons development by communist North Korea. You see, China doesn't want a free, unified Korea on its borders. It doesn't want genuine democracy on the other side of its borders because it would view said democracy as an existential threat. We must remember that, again, China is communist. They're actually totalitarian capitalists, to be technically correct. But for those modern people, especially the youth, and I hear this all the time, who like to justify socialism, apologize for it, think it's paradise, and they're naive enough to even say good things about the brutal Cuban dictator Fidel Castro, who thankfully, in my opinion, passed away a few months ago. These guys, again, don't understand what communism historically has been. It is responsible as a political system for more mass murders in history than any other system. You can look that up. It's even in Guinness Book of World Records. And if I were to ask you this question, especially pro-communist types or communist apologists, as I like to call them, these are these naive young, especially liberals who are so ignorant of history, name a single communist country that has ever really been communist and has not committed mass murder or has taken away basic freedoms and civil rights. You can't name one because it has never existed. And I got news for these sunshine types. It's never going to exist. Communism is communism, period, and it is against human nature. The idea that we're all equal, that everybody will have a chicken in everybody's pot and a rainbow and a pot of gold, it's never going to happen. We are not all equal. We are all individuals who are different with different skill sets, and that's an evolutionary fact. No two animals are the same. They may look alike, but one can run faster than the other. We're all different, and it is that diversity across the biological spectrum that has helped allow life forms to exist and survive in this world for billions of years. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be treated equal. I believe, of course, that we should all be equal under the law. But that's different than saying we're all equal. And the idea that you can't have competition, that you can't own property, that the state must run everything, that they must control the press, they must control the power supply, they must control the food supply, they must set prices, that, again, goes against human nature. Communism cannot work because it is ultimately anti-humane. Now, what does this have to do when we start off with Hillary Clinton? Well, as I try to tell Hillary Clinton apologists who are upset with me, a few of them, for daring to attack Hillary Clinton, as I wrote in the new book, Exposing Hillary Clinton, things have become so polarized now that if you dare criticize Hillary, even if you're telling the truth, and I am telling the truth in the book, I prove what I say, they will accuse you of being a Trump supporter, a deplorable, a right-wing neocon. And that's ridiculous in my case because I'm not. I've never been a Republican anything. I don't support Trump. And I have a book coming out later exposing him after the investigation on his possible ties to the Russians, which do exist, by the way. I've proven them in the book. After the investigation is done by Mr. Mueller, then I can release my book because I don't want to have to keep revising the thing. I want it done and over with. So I'm waiting, chomping at the bit for this investigation to go over. But so far, everything I've said publicly, that the key is Paul Manafort and the Ukrainians and the Kazakhstanis to unraveling and understanding what Trump did with the Russians, that's all long been a matter of public record. And as I prove in the book, Robert Mueller, Rudy Giuliani, Eric Holder, Loretta Lynch, and James Comey, all former directors of the FBI or the Department of Justice, they have cut deals in the past repeatedly with the Russian mafia to go ahead and keep things like Stinger missiles from falling into the hands of the Taliban. So there is some hypocrisy here. And what's interesting is as they were pursuing and prosecuting the Russian mafia types and Central Europe and Asia types surrounding Trump and doing money laundering and things like that from Trump Tower, is Trump got away every time scot-free. That's rather curious. Either that means the FBI was incompetent or some sort of deal was cut. Those files remain classified. Barack Obama, via Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, renewed their classification certification, so we won't know the truth for many, many years. So I view what's going on with North Korea and Communist China as a much bigger threat to the world and the United States than Donald Trump. Now, I admit that Trump would probably be more comfortable if he were king instead of president of the United States, because he could, as he has found out the hard way, get his way more often if he were king, but he's not. We don't live in a autocracy. We don't live in a king and queen type country. We live in a democracy, and Trump is not the threat to the United States that China is, or terrorism, or Al-Qaeda, or the Islamic State, or North Korea is, or I argue the economic state of the U.S., because again, it's $20 trillion in debt, and that insanity cannot continue. So that's it for this episode of Cal's Corner. Join me again next week, where we'll continue to talk about everything from politics to the paranormal.